have you ever applied for a job, felt perfect for it, and then suddenly the role disappears? Or worse, you go through job interviews, everything seems positive, and then you hear that the position has been filled by an internal candidate. So here's the real question. Was the job truly really open for you to apply in the first place? Because in many companies, when an internal candidate and external candidate compete for the same role, the outcome is often decided before the interview even starts. Today we're breaking down how this decision normally works, why companies prefer internal candidates, and most importantly, how you can still win as an external candidate when you're facing those internal candidates. And later in this video, I'll share with you one situation where external candidates can actually really win and have the best advantage. Top of the morning, everyone. My name is Tshidi and I'm back with another video. Today we're unpacking the real difference between internal and external candidates in the hiring process and how understanding this can actually completely change how you approach the job application. Why do companies love internal candidates? That's the first thing that people sometimes want to understand. And let me start with the truth that most recruiters won't tell you or they won't say it out loud. Hiring internal candidates in most cases is much safer for a lot of companies. And think about it this way. If a company hires someone internally, they already know a few things about that particular person. Number one, they know how that person works. Number two, they know that person's attitude and reliability. Number three, their strengths and some of the weaknesses that they can actually work and invest on. And then the fourth thing is whether they actually fit the company culture or they do not fit the company culture. That is already covered. So there's far less risk compared to if you're actually talking about an external candidate. And here's the thing about external candidates. One, the CV might look amazing. The interviews might go very well, but you can still never completely be sure that you're actually getting the right person that will be able to deliver when the time comes. And the uncertainty sometimes makes some of the hiring managers a bit nervous. But here's the one part that I actually want to also caution internal candidates about. The job is never yours if you're not prepared. And remember, you're competing with other people who might be even more hungrier than you. The second thing you should consider is make sure that your CV is competitive as an external candidate. Because as much as you might have connections internally, you're still competing with somebody else that might be more prepared. And then the last thing is in the interview, make sure that you've done enough research about that particular department, spoken to a few people to understand exactly what that department does. Because there's nothing worse than interviewing an internal candidate only to find out they don't know what the role is all about, what the department does, and that they haven't even spoken to anybody to try and at least understand what they were reading in the job spec if they did not understand that. The second thing that you should also sometimes be able to be aware of as an external candidate is that the job posting that was never really open. Many organizations have policies that have been put in place that sometimes require the roles to be advertised externally. This can be done to ensure a bit of fairness, some transparency, equal opportunity, and also sometimes in some cases to see what the market looks like. But in reality, the hiring manager might already have somebody in mind that they might be thinking about inside the company. So external candidates do apply, CVs are reviewed, interviews happen, but the internal candidate already has an advantage because they know the systems, they understand the team dynamics, they already have a relationship with the decision makers or have been referred by somebody in that particular team. It is, however, not impossible for an external candidate to actually win, but the internal candidate starts the race way ahead of everybody else. Now, before this sounds very discouraging, there's an important twist for a lot of people because sometimes companies actually specifically prefer external candidates. So if you were to ask me, where do external candidates then, stand a chance? Where do they have an advantage over an internal candidate? And here's a situation where you guys as an external candidate can suddenly become very valuable. Now, when a company wants new ideas, new skills, or just major change in the business, if a business is trying to transform or is trying to expand or introduce new technologies, internal candidates might not always be what the company is looking for at that particular time. That is when the hiring manager normally looks external to say, we want people that can bring a few things. Number one, we want someone who's going to bring in fresh perspective. Number two, experience from other industries, especially the ones that are winning the deals that we're not winning. And then number three, new strategies and approaches so that they can actually challenge the status quo that we already have. And think of it like a football team, when they bring in a new coach. Sometimes the team needs somebody who's not part of the old system to actually drive that particular change. And in those situations, external candidates can actually become the preferred choice for that team or for that particular company. But there's one thing external candidates can do differently if they actually want to beat those internal candidates. And most job seekers completely sometimes miss this part when they're looking for these opportunities. Here's the strategy that will help you as an external candidate to win over an internal candidate. If you're applying externally, you cannot rely solely on your CV. Internal candidates already have something that you do not. They've got visibility, they've got relationships, they've got networks, they've already been speaking to a lot of people. So the smartest thing as an external candidate that you can do is the following. Number one is you have to research the company deeply, and not just only the job descriptions, but the company goals, the current challenges, the industry trends, things that the company might be missing. Speak to a few people that you might know in that particular company. Secondly, they tailor the application to show how they can actually solve problems the company currently faces, not just what they've actually done in the past. And then the third last thing is, they build connections before the interview. That might even mean engaging with the company employees on LinkedIn, attending industry events, or sometimes reaching out to some of the recruiters. Because the closer you get to understand that company, the more you reduce the internal candidate's advantage. And here's a question that I actually want you to ask. Have you actually ever lost an opportunity to an internal candidate? Or, as an internal candidate, have you lost an opportunity to an external candidate that you thought was definitely yours? Let me actually know about that in the comments, because this happens more often than a lot of people realize. Now let's try and do a quick recap so that at least we all understand what we tried to focus on today. We covered three main things. First, why companies often prefer internal candidates. That is one of the most important things that you should remember. Number two, why some job postings are advertised externally, even though there's an internal candidate that already exists that the line manager might be looking at. And then third, the situation where you as an external candidate can actually have the advantage, or the situation where you as an internal candidate needs to step up to actually have that particular advantage. The key lessons here is being an external candidate does not mean you cannot win, but you must approach the application strategically, not passively. Yes, it is a job sometimes to look for a job, so make sure that you actually do it very well to ensure that when you get to that job interview, you are the best candidate for that. And before your next application, ask yourself one simple question. Why would this company choose somebody from outside instead of promoting somebody internally? If you can answer that clearly in your application and your interviews, you immediately become a stronger candidate. If you found these tips helpful, don't forget to like, don't forget to share with as many people as possible, and please subscribe, because we've created this channel to help as many people as possible. Until we meet again in the next video, peace.